Hello and welcome to the Dustin and Eric Podcast Show, brought to you by Mimosa Network. Hi, I'm Dustin.
And I'm Eric.
And this is Jeff.
I'm Jeff.
And today we're on episode number 14, SRS versus Wi-Fi Interop mode. So we're discussing the differences between the two and when to use one over the other. So, again, our special guest, which I guess he's not really a special guest anymore because he's here all the time, Jeff Jones. Welcome back to the show.
It's good to be here along with the furniture.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And so
He's special, all right.
we'll get right into it. We'll start the main course with the SRS versus Wi-Fi Interop mode.
Let's do it.
All right, so I know it's a really common question. I get it a lot via the community page, Facebook. I know that, Jeff, I'm sure you get it a lot on Mimosa Chat.
Mm-hmm.
What is the difference between SRS and Wi-Fi Interop mode, and when should I use either mode for point-to-multipoint deployments? I know that both of these guys here have a lot to talk about, but I'll just go ahead and give you a quick rundown. Wi-Fi Interop mode is basically the mode on the A5 or A5C that will allow third-party clients to connect, like MikroTik or Ubiquiti. You can put it in hotspot mode, and then laptops and cell phones and anything else that connects to Wi-Fi can connect up to your A5C or A514. SRS mode is our proprietary GPS sync solution, which only communicates with Mimosa C5, C5C, and C5X client radios. The good thing about SRS mode, of course, again, is GPS sync, and you have extended frequency range from 4.9 all the way up to 6.2, soon to be 6.4. So, Eric, you want to tell us a little bit more about SRS and Wi-Fi Interop mode? What do you have over there?
I've got kind of a general layout between the two. So frequency range, like you just mentioned, it's a little more limited at 5170 to 5835 in Wi-Fi Interop, and compared to 4900 to 6200 meg in SRS. There's difference in authentication modes. Maybe you can go into that a little more, or details. Client counts. I think in SRS we're at 44 and up to 100 in interop mode, and so forth. Actually, I had a question about the authentication modes. You know, the phase shift key, the PSK, and the enterprise, et cetera, et cetera. I don't
So feel free to ask your question, because those people that are watching have that question.
Just come right out and ask it.
Yeah.
What's the difference in the authentication codes? We have in Wi-Fi Interop, say, open, PSK, and enterprise. Is that right?
Yes.
But with only single PSK authentication mode when running SRS.
So that's close. You have enterprise and PSK in SRS mode, whereas you have open PSK and enterprise mode and Wi-Fi Interop mode. So again, open mode would be for open Wi-Fi network for phones, laptops, third-party radios, Mimosa radios, anything that you want to connect up. Doesn't have a password on it, so anybody can hook up to it. PSK mode is the standard Wi-Fi SSID with the standard 8 or more character password. Enterprise mode is where you're using radius authentication.
Okay.
You have a username and password you sign in with a client radio. Otherwise, you won't be able to associate to the AP.
Different encryption type of layers or type a way to get encryption
Right.
modes into it.
It's easier for, say, an installer to go out and put a radio up, authenticate with username and password.
Right.
Because then you can pull down configuration files and stuff like that with radius. In SRS mode, again, like we were talked about, it doesn't allow third-party clients. So there's no point in having an open mode with no password on it.
And if I go into, say, McDonald's and open Wi-Fi and hotspots and things like that, that's where you're going to generally find the interop, and just different mobile devices can get right in and without password.
So, Jeff, do you want to tell us a little more about SRS Wi-Fi and why Wi-Fi Interop mode actually exists?
Yeah, it's actually got a pretty interesting history. Originally, when we rolled out the A5 radio, we did not have SRS mode available just yet. It was still being cooked up in the back room there, and yet we had this product, the A5, A5 14, A5 18 that first came out. So the Wi-Fi Interop mode was originally designed for the ability to use the A514 before the SRS mode was actually completed. So it gave the operator the ability to use non-Mimosa client devices in conjunction with the A5 series radio. So it worked out really well because we were able to roll out the product and get it out there and get folks using it. And then a few firmware upgrades later, we came out with the SRS mode, which was really the true intention of the A5 series radio was to operate in SRS mode. So we left the Wi-Fi Interop mode there as a means to provide the capabilities of using non-Mimosa devices. But really it was a mode that was really interim mode more than it was a mode that was to be used to this day. Yet we have a lot of customers using Wi-Fi Interop mode, so it's kind of nice to have that because it gives you the flexibility.
You get up. I'm sorry. You get up to 8 link IDs in interop mode. Is that right? Do I have that right? On 5 gig, your SSIDs you can have up to 8 link IDs. Is that
your SSID count? Yeah. So you can have up to 8. I think technically you can go higher than 8. We've limited to 8 because if you go over a certain amount of SSIDs, it actually creates a lot of overhead and will slow down your connection. So I think the sweet spot that we found was around 8. So
okay.
We keep it at 8 SSIDs on the Wi-Fi Interop mode.
And then on the other side of that, SRS has a single 5 gig link ID.
Right.
One.
Right.
Up to your 44 client count.
Today we have one SSID in SRS mode. There's been some talk about adding more SSIDs in SRS mode. That's a feature request that came in a while back, and I know that we're looking at that. I'm not sure if it's on a product roadmap, but I know that it's definitely been discussed as an option in the future.
Right. So I know we talked a little bit about the differences between SRS and Wi-Fi mode, but could you tell us the differences that we didn't go over between the two modes?
Oh, by memory, huh?
Sure.
Well, we'll see. Wi-Fi Interop mode gives you the ability, like I said, to have 3 different authentication modes, whereas SRS mode gives you only a single PSK mode. Let's see, what would be some other things?
VLAN management?
Latency, airtime utilization.
Yeah, okay. So we can talk about that. On the SRS mode, it's hard-coded for 8 milliseconds, 50-50 TDMA distribution window. On Wi-Fi Interop mode, there's no TDMA setting, so it's actually wide open compared with SRS mode. There is some built-in management so that you're obviously going to be communicating over a TDMA protocol in the SRS mode, whereas Wi-Fi Interop you're using just that. It's a 802.11 AC protocol.
So we get people coming in chat, email community who say, well, Wi-Fi Interop mode is better because they have lower latency and they have faster speeds.
Yep.
Why would I ever want to use SRS mode? And I know that we explain that to customers all the time that, well, you have a little bit higher latency in SRS mode because of the TDMA timing windows, so everything has its own time slots. Whereas with Wi-Fi Interop mode, it's kind of wide open, like you said. People get what they get. If you have some customers that are using up all the airtime, then all your other customers then get basically shafted. Is that right?
Well, that's a good way of putting it. With SRS mode, it's what I like to call a managed mode, so that you're using time division multiple access. So every client, every user is getting a slice of the time slot, whereas on Wi-Fi Interop, if you have a user that has, heavy download and is kind of hogging the bandwidth, there's no management whatsoever. That person's going to steal, for lack of a better term, the airtime from other users. Whereas in SRS mode, that is a managed approach, so you're getting more of a each person gets a slice of the pie, and it's a little more airtime fairness, as we like to call it.
So clients that have weaker signal levels, they also have a higher utilization, right? On
Yes.
Wi-Fi interrupt mode.
Yes, in Wi-Fi interop mode, what will happen is if the person has a weak link, there will be a lot of retries, and sometimes you'll even get like packet collisions, retries, and your PER will tend to go up. Not always, but sometimes you'll see a PER go up where your packet error rate is causing more overhead for that one client, and essentially hogging up the bandwidth that way. So Wi-Fi interop mode, that's one of the challenges with that, is that you don't really have to manage it for folks that are using too much airtime.
So with in SRS mode with a varying client distance to the access point, that's managed and it's kind of controlled and streamlined a little more as far as the flow, as far as that.
I'm not following what you're...
So I think basically what Eric's trying to say is that everybody still has the exact same time slot regardless of distance and signal
Distance
level.
and signal
Yeah.
level, yeah. Thank you, yeah.
Translation for Eric.
Gracias, amigo.
De nada.
So Eric, after you've heard what we've talked about with Wi-Fi and SRS mode, would you ever want to use Wi-Fi interrupt mode for anything?
Yeah, if I'm outside of a single a product network, if I access into that network, I've got different manufacturers that have to use different radios.
Right.
You know.
So if you're upgrading your network from a different competitor to Mimosa, that would be a good time to use Wi-Fi interrupt mode, is while you're swapping out those clients.
Very good. Yes.
Right.
Yeah,
And
good
then
point.
once you've swapped all those clients out,
Yeah.
then you have the option to change
Then
to
I can change
SRS
over.
mode.
Yeah. that would
So, Jeff, what would you say would be another good reason to use Wi-Fi interrupt mode over SRS mode? What would be the best use case for that?
Well, if you're using like a public hotspot environment where you're setting up an A5 series radio for public use, you really don't have control of who's going to be logging onto it, right? So with Wi-Fi interop, you have the ability to cater to the masses, whereas in SRS mode, that needs to be a proprietary protocol with Mimosa equipment, so you'll need to have a Mimosa radio in order to operate in SRS mode. So like I said, I think Wi-Fi interop has its place. We found that it works well for certain circumstances, like you said, folks that are migrating over time. It really does provide a nice feature set in that respect.
So how many clients would you say would be, preferably max on Wi-Fi interrupt mode, because you have the utilization you have to worry about?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've seen as little as 50 clients, no problem with low bandwidth and low utilization, as well as the consumption of airtime works just fine. I've seen as many as 100, and it's kind of a sliding scale. Someone that's operating the A5 series access point with 100 clients, not everyone's going to have 50 to 100 megs of usage if it's really high capacity, high usage scenario. So it really depends on how much utilization each client is using.
Right. But I personally think that SRS mode probably has better pros than cons. I would
agree.
say that SRS is a much better option to use
I agree.
if you had the choice between the two. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and wrap it up here. Basically, let's summarize real quick what we talked about. Do you want to do that, Jeff?
Yeah, so SRS mode, we recommend that you use SRS mode over Wi-Fi interop, because really the intention of our firmware was solely designed to support SRS mode, whereas Wi-Fi interop was really designed as an interim solution. It does have its place in the market, depending upon what you're trying to do, but if you want to manage connection between your client and the actual access point, SRS is the way to go. As far as Wi-Fi interop, I think it has its place. Like I said, I think if you are to use it, you have to take into account that everyone has access to it. So your usage may fluctuate up and down based on the traffic capacity on that access point. So keep that in mind when you're actually operating in Wi-Fi interop mode.
Excellent. All right, guys. Well,
All right.
that's it for this show. Thanks for coming, Jeff. I appreciate your contribution.
It's good to be here.
Eric,
Thanks,
it's
Jeff.
good to have you. Good to have the show going again here, and we'll see you guys next time on our next podcast episode. Thanks for tuning in. Please hit the subscribe or follow button to stay up to date with our latest podcast, which will be available on YouTube, iTunes, Google Play, and SoundCloud.